I want to speak today about how to bless the city. It's the start of a new period, almost like a new season in our lives. And as we are re-emerging, reconnecting, there are lots of opportunities, lots of exciting things happening, lots of kind of reunions and lots of opportunities to shape things. But at the same time, it can feel like a slightly odd season. I was reading an article in the Washington Post where someone called Amy Cuddy was saying, actually, you could almost describe it as pandemic's flux syndrome. That's not a technical term, but this sense of slight cognitive dissonance, slight unease that people are feeling. A kind of a re-emergence into normality, but normality maybe not being all we thought it might be. And they were saying in the Washington Post, a lot of people just carrying a kind of a residual level of sadness over the last 18 months and finding it a bit harder, taking a bit more energy to reconnect and start to do some of these things again, whether it's, and that's across the board in all contexts, careers, backgrounds, people still carrying maybe some of the scars of this crazy time. And it can take a bit of extra courage, a bit of extra energy to step out and to reach out after a year and a half where we've experienced so much rapid change and at times traumatic change. The tendency for us might be to become a little bit passive and almost to see ourselves as kind of people who are just kind of buffeted around by external forces outside our control. And so in that context, it's maybe more important than ever that we remind ourselves of our identity as people who are called, equipped, and shaped for a purpose that goes far beyond us, to impact and to make a difference in our communities and our city. And what we see in this passage is how we might do that, how we might be a church that brings blessing to those people around us, how we might be a church that brings blessing to the city in which we're placed, how we might each ourselves make a difference. I mean, if Jesus has positioned you for a purpose, wherever you are right now, school, your university, your hospital, your family, your community, if he's positioned you for a purpose, then what is it going to take for us to make a difference? And that's exactly what this passage looks at. And the first thing we see in this passage, Jesus has just been talking about the Beatitudes. He's just been talking about how we might be blessed. And it's interesting because his way of describing being blessed is different to what we might expect in 2021 in our context. So Jesus says, if you want to be blessed, then you need to be humble. You need to be the person who's taking the lowest place. If you want to be blessed, then you want to be meek, not always pushing yourself forward. If you want to be blessed, then you want to be pursuing righteousness, trying to live a holy life. It's surprising. And then he's turning to his kind of whole group of people and his disciples, and he says, you are the salt of the earth. Not you could be the salt of the earth, not you might be the salt of the earth, but you are the salt of the earth. Your identity, your purpose, wherever he's called you, wherever he's placed you, is to be salt. And you'll know far better than I do that salt has two main functions. It amplifies flavor and it resists decay. So here's some salt. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And so you get some salt and it kind of amplifies flavor. You kind of sprinkle a little bit on your food and it kind of, not that much, maybe it's quite a lot. And it amplifies the flavor of that food, but it also resists decay. You would certainly in times gone by, put a lot of salt into meat if you wanted to keep for a while because it would stop the bacteria growing in the meat. It would resist decay. In times gone by, they would even throw salt when they're on ships into wounds to stop the wound becoming infected and to stop the infection growing, which sounds very painful. So salt has a number of distinct purposes, but it does both those things, enhancing flavor and resisting decay by being distinct. By being a different chemical compound, sodium chloride, to that which it's applied to. Its value, its purpose is in being distinct. So Jesus says you're the salt of the earth, salt of the world, but if salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. If salt loses its saltiness, its distinct essence, it can't do what it's made to do. It can't do the very purpose it has. And it's really interesting, the phrase salt of the earth, because to be really useful, salt has to be distinct, different from what's around it, and yet it has to be immersed. It has to be in the earth. To be salt, you have to be different, but you have to be closely connected to the people around you. And that can be a hard place to be. We all want to feel like we fit in. There's a real natural human thing to want to fit in and to be the same as those around us. And it feels good when you're like that. You're one of the team, you're agreeing with everyone else. But what if there's a way of belonging that benefits and blesses those you're around because you are different, because you are distinct? I grew up in a little town just north of London called Luton, and I love my hometown. My family still live there, but the area we grew up in was quite a rough part of that town, and the school I went to was a really rough school. So just to give you an example, my year, 16% of people got 5 C's at GCSE, and it was quite dangerous at times, and eventually, I guess it's these days what you call a failing school, largely because it failed and they knocked it down. And but I loved it, and it was great, and I learned a lot there about all sorts of things. And so when I started working as a barrister, I was just slightly apprehensive about not fitting in, and quite conscious that I might not fit in. It was a very formal place. There were lots of kind of like old school people who went to the right schools, and there were lots of unwritten rules. And my accent and my way of speaking was a little bit different to what they were used to. So I'll never forget on my first day, I came in and my boss opened the door for me, and I said, "Cheers, mate." And he said, "What?" And I said, "Oh, cheers, mate." And he looked like I'd sworn, and I don't think he was used to that, and I thought I've got something slightly wrong there, and so I was slightly unsettled by that. And then he made a comment about my suit. He was like, "Where did you get your suit from?" And I said, "From Suits Direct." And he kind of looked a bit shocked about that, and I just felt a little bit uneasy the whole day. And then we started our first case, and I was thinking, maybe this isn't going to work out. Maybe I'm an outsider. Maybe I'm just too different to these people. And the first case we did was defending someone accused of driving a lorry with a very large amount of drugs into the UK. And my boss was explaining the facts to me. He said, "Well, look, he looks like he's one of the cartel, the guy we're defending. There's £5 million worth of drugs in the back of this lorry. He was driving it. And, why would the cartel take a risk of him not knowing? Because, so much drugs, and he must have been on it. He must have known that much drugs, so valuable. If they were prepared to let him drive, it looks like he's in on the conspiracy." And I said, "Yeah, but there's no honor amongst thieves, is there?" He said, "What?" And I said, "Well, yeah, it's £5 million in drugs, but why? How do they know he's going to stick to the conspiracy? He could just drive it off and do a deal with a different supplier, cut them out. Actually, he could just be a weak link in the chain. Why, if you're the cartel, why take the risk? A cartel is only as strong as its weakest link. And if he goes down the pub and starts blabbing about it, starts chatting about it, then the cartel is going to be completely kind of undermined. I don't see why they would take the risk on this guy knowing anything. The drugs are well concealed, they're well packed in the lorry. Why tell the driver at all? In my experience, gangs like this tend to often operate on a need-to-know basis." He said, Stephen, what is your experience? And I was like, just, mates, just think life, Anyway, he seemed impressed. He used this line in his closing speech, and the guy was acquitted. And he was so happy, he bought me a suit to make it up to me. And I was thinking, maybe I will fit in a little bit in this place. Maybe I can do it. You see, maybe there's things that make you different that can bring blessing into your context. You might be that the thing that makes you different isn't a disadvantage, it's the very reason you've been placed there. It might be your faith, which might make you feel a bit awkward at times and apprehensive when you're grabbing coffee with your colleagues or you're standing around the water cooler. Your faith is the very thing that could be a source of blessing in your company, your board of directors, your hospital, your university. When you're working alongside those in our community who are on the street, maybe. Your faith might be the very thing that makes a difference. But in my experience, there are 2 opposing risks. The first is to be so desperate to maintain your distinctness that you separate yourself from the world. You separate yourself from people. You forget that salt needs to be applied to be useful. It's no good just having it in a pile. It needs to be close to people to help That's what its purpose is. Very easy to be so fearful of losing your distinctness, you separate yourself from people and you don't actually get involved. But the opposing risk is to be so immersed, so longing to be in the right group, so longing to be in the right gang, so longing to be alongside everyone else that you just go with the flow. And over the months and years, you're trying so hard to appear one of the group, indistinguishable from everyone around you, that one day you wake up and you actually are indistinguishable from everyone around you. You've kind of lost that very thing which made you different. And that's why it's so important to remind yourself, I've been placed here for a purpose. I'm salt. I know what my purpose is. I'm distinct for the blessing of this community. I'm distinct for the blessing of this company, this workplace, this family. And the very thing that makes me distinct is the reason I've been put here. And that's how I'm going to enhance the good and resist the bad. You can even take some salt, take some salt tomorrow, put it on your desk at work, don't put it in a line or HR will get a bit worried. But put it out on your desk, say, no, I'm salt. Let it remind yourself. We're so interested, so many performance reviews and annual appraisals at work. We need to create our own performance review, our own annual appraisal. Not say, how much money have I made? How am I doing compared to everyone else? To sit down and say, how salty am I? Am I making a difference? And not to judge yourself based on what you're bringing in, but maybe judge yourself based on these values in the Beatitudes. So actually, this year, have I been more merciful? Am I bringing that here? Am I bringing humility here? Am I being meek in my context here? Because you're walking to a different beat. You've been put there for a different reason. You've got a different purpose. And I know sometimes it can be discouraging. Sometimes you could be there and you think, I'm the only one. 300 people here and I'm the only one. You might say that. But the thing is about salt, you don't need much of it to make a really big difference. And if you have 2 kilos of food, you only need about a tiny bit, like 6 grams of salt to season it. You don't need much influence to make a difference. It's like, 1 in 300. You don't need many people to shape a culture. You don't need many followers of Jesus to start to impact a city. If you've got a conviction, you've been placed there for a purpose. Be distinct. And then the second thing we see in this passage is be visible. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, let your light shine before others that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And when you place your trust in Jesus, he puts his light in you. It's like a light. And his light shines in you and through you out into the world. Together, with all our different lights, we're like a city on a hill that can't be hidden. But the natural quality of light is to be visible. That's what it does. I mean, you don't have to say, light, could you shine? It just shines. So what it does, it naturally is visible, and it makes things visible. Light brings clarity. It enables you to see things as they really are. And Jesus says, no one lights a lamp and then puts it under a bowl, because that would be silly. I mean, no one does that, do they? I mean, because why have a light if you're going to put it under a bowl? But then sometimes I think I do that, because I kind of, sometimes on Sunday I'm like, how great is our, lights up, woo, and sing with me. And then on Monday when I get that email that annoys me, I'm like, just shut that off for a little bit. Or like on Sunday, I'm like, oh, how great, yeah, good worship, woo, hi, yeah, woo. And then on Wednesday, when someone says to me, what did you do on Sunday? I'm like, oh, not much, I just hung out with mates and, we just did some stuff and, it's like without even realizing it, we want to hide the light. Like we light the light, but sometimes it's just easier if it wasn't so visible. And it's very easy just to put it under a bowl. But light isn't meant to be hidden, it's meant to shine. And I've struggled with this at times. When I was in my sixth form college, when I was kind of 16 to 17, there's this lovely young girl in one of my classes called Becky. And as we were leaving the class one day, I liked being in the in crowd, and I liked being invited to all the cool parties, and I liked just hanging out with my mates and, all that sort of stuff. And so I believed in Jesus, but I didn't want that to be a big part of how people related to me. I didn't want it to get in the way, I didn't want it to change their impression of me. And so she came up to me after this class. She said, "Stephen, can we have a word? Just for future. If someone says that to you, run." But I said, yeah. And she just said this. She said, "Stephen, you're never going to be able to help anyone in your life if you keep your faith in a box." And then she turned around and just walked off. And she did it politely. She did it considerately, compassionately, kindly. Couldn't have done it better. Perfect rebuke. And I turned around and I walked away and I thought, who does she think she is? She doesn't know me, stuck up Becky. She doesn't know how difficult my life is. She doesn't know the things I'm facing. Put your faith in a box. Anyway, all the way home I was like, Becky this, Becky that. And you think the most annoying thing about what she did was that she was absolutely right. And by the time I got home, I was like, she's right. It's so annoying. She's completely right. And I was just putting my faith in a box. And there's been times in life when I've noticed myself doing it, almost without realizing. I'm just hiding it a little bit and not letting people see. And I think I've thought, well, I don't want people to think less of me. I don't want to waste my relational capital. But then I kind of feel like you've only got this relational capital with a small group of people for a small amount of time. What have you got it for other than to invest it in something? There's been times when I've taken risks and done that, and I think, that was good, but I could have done more. There's times when I've kind of let my light shine a little bit, but I'm still kind of shading it a bit. I thought I could have done more. I was just around those people for a short period of time. I could have done a bit more. So how do we do it? Well, I just before the pandemic, I was at a wedding, and I was chatting the side of the dance floor, as you do, with another guy, and we both felt it was a bit early in the evening to kind of throw shapes. So we were just chatting away. And I was saying, where do you work? He said this company. And I actually knew a guy called Alex who worked at that company. And I said, "Oh, do you know Alex?" Which was a bit of a long stab. He said, "Oh yeah, I know him. He's quite a bit more senior than him, but I know him." He said, "Oh, he's such a good guy. He's really kind around the office and really encouraging, even though we're more junior than him. He always shows an interest. He's always kind of, cheering people on and motivating people, and has always got time for people. I really like that." He said, actually, even on ethical things, he'd sometimes be prepared to bring things to the board that he didn't agree with and take a bit of a risk to say, "Look, I think this is inconsistent with our values." He's such a good guy. I said, "Oh, that's fascinating." He said, "How do you know him?" I was like, "Oh." I said, "Oh, well, Alex we go to the same church." He's like, "Alex goes to church?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Oh." And because he's like penny drop as he kind of put all the pieces together. He was like, "That's really interesting." He said, "On a Sunday?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he said, "Do you have services on a Sunday?" And I was like, "Yeah." He said, "Can people just come to him?" I said, "We just let people ride in. He's like, "Okay." He said, "Do you think I could come sometime?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Because I'm just thinking about maybe exploring faith a bit." I said, "Well, if you're exploring faith, we're just about to start this thing called the Alpha course. It's starting in just 2 weeks' time. You could come to that if you want." He said, "Okay, that sounds cool." I had to do nothing. It was the easiest invite to anything I've ever made, because Alex had been in this company for a number of years, being light. Being kind, being encouraging, supporting people, taking a stand, resisting some of the bad. And it had shone into this guy's life. And all he needed was the slightest nudge to join up the dots. I find things much harder than that. I get really anxious when I invite anyone to anything. So at the moment I'm thinking who to invite. Last time I invited someone to Alpha, I wanted to invite my friend Matt. So I was like, sent him a text. I was like, hi Matt. Long time no see. Hope you're doing really, really well. No pressure at all. Sorry for the random invite, but I was wondering if you might want to come along to this thing we're doing at church called Alpha. No worries if not. Catch up soon anyway. Send. And then there's this kind of what's going to happen? And then Oh, he's opened it. He's read it. He's not typing. Is he chatting to the other colleagues about it? Is he screenshotted it and put it in a WhatsApp group to all our other mates? Like, what's he done? I don't know. And it's like, but it's such a small thing. It's such a small thing. You know, right now, the latest research shows that 1 in 5 people you know right now is interested in having a conversation about Jesus. 1 in 5. 5 to 1, that's good odds. Really good odds. Now, I'm not saying on Monday you should go, do you want a conversation about Jesus? Do you want a conversation? Where is this person? Or do you want a conversation? But it's worth the shot as you scroll through your phone book. 1 in 5 people are interested in having a conversation about Jesus. And in other ways too, Jesus says, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. The Bible is so helpful. It always has balance. You know, sometimes the Bible says, you know, when you do these things, do them in secret, so that no one will know, and your Father who sees in heaven will reward them. It says, don't let your left hand know what your right is doing. But here Jesus says there's times where it's really important to let your light shine, for people to see your good deeds. When we moved to Oxford, we moved during the second or third, or I've lost count, during a lockdown. And it was quite stressful moving during lockdown because we had to get places for our girls at schools, and we've got a lot of girls, and so it was like a lot of schools. And I was phoning all these schools. And you'd get into these conversations with, you know, an assistant or the head teacher. And then one head in particular, I remember, he was, you know, he's trying his best to be helpful, but it was difficult because didn't have places. And he said, why are you moving in the midst of a lockdown? And I was like, I know it's awkward. I said, I've got a job and I've got to move because of the job. And I was excited about it, but I was just trying to explain it. And he said, well, where are you working? And I said, I'm going to be working at this church in the centre of Oxford. And I thought that would be enough to say for him to lose interest. He said, well, which church? And I was like, it's a church called St. Aldates. And he was like, oh. I was like, what's he going to? There's a lot on the line. And he was like, you know, that church has a really big impact in our city. And I was like, really? And he said, yeah, he said they do a lot of good for the city, I think. I think they help a lot of people. And I was like, oh, that's really good to hear. I can't tell you how encouraging that is. That the head of a school somewhere in the city, when he hears the name of this church, says, that's a church that does a lot of good in our city. Let your light shine so that others may see your good deeds. I can't tell you how moving it is, how encouraging it is to be part of a church which has birthed social action ministries, which have transformed so many people's lives. I was at an event on Thursday, 25 years of Viva International. An organization started with a group of students at this church who were praying, just praying for God to do something. And out of that birthed this charity that last year has helped 2.2 million children around the world. I can't tell you how moving it is to be part of a church which houses and cares for people in need, shelters them, and doesn't just shelter them, but supports them and encourages them and tries to get them into employment, which doesn't just meet people at the prison gate, but meets them at the prison gate and then helps them to reintegrate in society in a really holistic and integrated way, which runs alpha courses in prison, but then wants to also see how people are going to develop with the rest of their lives, which supports those who are trying to get jobs. I love the fact that this is a church for many years, and starting again at the end of next month, is going to runs a meal every one Sunday a month, 3-course meal, a banquet really, for those in our community who are struggling a bit and need a bit of extra help. Doing exactly what Jesus asked us to do. You know, when you throw a banquet, invite those who are in real need. I love the fact that it's a church where many people come alongside those who need training and support and encouragement. And we all need that from time to time. We all struggle from time to time. And that it's not just based on like doing things to people. I've spoken to people. It's based on friendship. People are brought into friendship. We want to be a blessing to the city, a light that shines, so that many people might say, look at the good they do, and praise our Father in heaven. This is a time for us, together, individually, wherever you've been placed, to let your light shine. To pray, say, God, I can't do it on my own, but Holy Spirit, would you give opportunities for me to come alongside people and support them. Even though I'm struggling myself, even though I'm still feeling a bit of sadness myself, even though I haven't got over the last 18 months myself, I don't want that to inhibit me. I'm going to take some steps out. I'm going to take a few risks. I'm going to invite some people to things. I'm going to be distinct. I'm going to let my light shine. Because I don't want to miss this opportunity to bring blessing to the place you've called me to be. In Jesus' name, amen.